We love you. You're entertaining. You're good for the show, but stay the hell off the field. Like,
Yeah.
stay off the field. Like, can
He's
we
not
not?
he's not in good enough shape. I mean, I was standing right
Yeah.
next to him yesterday, and this isn't the Jimbo Fisher of 30 years ago. That was a pretty crafty quarterback.
Yeah. Can we not get on the field during a scoop and score? Either way, I think Texas A&M could have a new shot of life with Max Johnson at quarterbacks. It just looked more fluid, and they're going to have their opportunity to play it out, just like LSU had. Look, the LSU Arkansas, Paul, is an example of how good the SEC is in that you got an Arkansas team who lost to BYU. You had an LSU team that beat the hell out of Mississippi State the week before. So you're thinking, hey, roll the ball out. LSU will beat them. We'll move on. But they got their best punch from KJ Jefferson in Arkansas, and Jaden Daniels and Brian Kelly again responded. That's another team like Alabama, like Texas A&M, who took their loss at a conference. This thing is going to be wild down the stretch because LSU, again, you could argue, along with Georgia, could be the best team in the SEC.
Yeah, and a week from today, if LSU is undefeated in the SEC, I think we'll have to say that because I mean that's a pretty tough stretch to pick up the pieces after barely getting by Arkansas and then going to Oxford. Now, what kind of shape Ole Miss will be in, I have no idea. But Lane will definitely have his back to the wall. But that's a really a big one. And by the way, Ole Miss has to play not only LSU this weekend, they go to Georgia later in the year, so they are hanging on by a thread.
Yeah, and with what we've seen, look, Georgia, they sleepwalk for a quarter, and they put their foot down. I'm still waiting for them to play someone.
Well, that won't happen for a while.
Yeah, and that's kind of the obnoxious part is we want to evaluate Georgia, but you just can't evaluate Georgia against UAB. You just can't. I want to know who Carson Beck is. I still don't.
No, and next week, I mean, at Auburn, don't buy into wow, this is the South's oldest rivalry and all that stuff. The next week may be interesting. Kentucky comes in there after playing Florida. If they can get a win against the Gators, but we also fell for that game 2 years ago, if you remember. Game day
and
it was a mess. So, but Kentucky at least they'll be a legitimate team.
Yeah, and they've got the defense again with Mark Stoops. They got the quarterback in Devin Leary. So there's a lot to play out. The only thing that, and we'll leave it here on a fun Saturday of college football, Paul, everything felt right and comfort food yesterday because Jim Harbaugh returned, and it was so right. Milk and cookies, milk and steak was back.
You know, I was watching SportsCenter earlier, and he came on, and my wife said, "Why is that guy so mad?" Man, yeah, for a guy that's making $9 million a year and has one of the best jobs in college football, I don't understand the angry face all the time. I mean, it's just Jim. I mean, you're not being held hostage or something. I mean, you don't have to do this job if you don't like it. So. I recommend to Jim to lighten up. I mean, somehow that program made it a couple of weeks without him. They didn't look much different with him. And talk about when are they ever going to play a good team? I'm waiting for that one too. I know there's a few on the schedule, but it doesn't seem like we've seen Michigan tested at all.
Yeah, you beat me to it. I'm pulling up their schedule. We're talking about this. The first 4 games: East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers.
Embarrassing.
They're at Nebraska next week.
Oh.
They're then at Minnesota, who just had an embarrassing loss. Then against Indiana. Then against Michigan State. Then Purdue. They don't play anyone until
That's absurd.
They don't play anyone until at Penn State, November 11th.
Yeah,
like we rip on Georgia's schedule. That's the worst schedule I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, Georgia had an excuse for the
Oklahoma
time. I mean, they were supposed to be in Norman last week. Michigan doesn't have an excuse. They're not moving. They're not in a league that they were told they couldn't play a game. There's no reason for one of the greatest programs in college football history to have that type of a schedule. And I caught a few minutes of the Penn State game last night.
They're legit.
Yeah, I mean that Michigan Penn State is circled pretty brightly on my calendar.
Like Paul, I'm like I try not to get too far ahead because I think it's important in college football. You got to live kind of in the pocket you're in and don't spread out too far. But now that I'm down this rabbit hole, I cannot believe how awful this schedule is.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to you one more time towards the end. East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers. That's the first 4. Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, Purdue, Penn State, Maryland, Ohio State.
Like, the next 5 might be worse than the first 4.
What are we doing?
Yeah, and again, the final 3 are competitive, but that's a long time to wait. And I don't know. I realize it's all going to change next year, but they can't afford a loss. I think that's pretty obvious.
And I've been on the side of expansion is killing the sport in terms of regionality. The Big Ten needs Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA. You look at the Big Ten right now, that is a joke. It's 3 teams. It's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan.
And you mentioned the SEC, and I know that sounds absurd to Big Ten people because they get tired of the SEC hype, but it's fairly legit. And I think the game you referenced, Arkansas OSU, is indicative of that. And I mean, I can't. I mean, first of all, the idea that Iowa and Penn State were, I'll get into my awful announcing hat for a second, but it's pretty obvious that CBS has moved on from the SEC by sending their B team to cover a much better game in Tuscaloosa on paper between Ole Miss and Alabama. I still haven't figured out who was doing that game as I was watching it on a plane, but Gary and Vern, or whatever their names are,
Gary and Brad Nessler.
Brad. I'm sorry.
They had to go watch the absolute atrocity that is Iowa football.
Well, it served them right.
I could go on a real tangent right now about the Big Ten. I won't. I don't want to. It's just I'm too tired to get into it. But just stop with Iowa football and trying to convince. Just stop. It's a 3-team league: Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. That's it. They need USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington to be relevant because the rest of the league is awful. It's awful.
No, and the 3 networks, paid billions so they can show all those games, and they will get better. And all the people that talk about, why, now you know why, and it's also why the SEC is extremely careful with. They added 2 big time programs,
2 good ones,
and they're not just searching for another school right now.
When the Arkansas job is maybe the 10th best in the SEC because the rest of the league is loaded. Arkansas right now would be the 4th best team, if not 3rd and a half best team in the Big Ten tomorrow. Arkansas is a really good team. It's well coached, but I'm a huge fan of Sam Pittman, but where does he? I mean, there's nowhere to go. No.
And you also, it depends on the luck of which school do you get from the other side? Like A&M this year, in addition to all the schools we've talked about, they get to go to Knoxville. Those are really brutal trips that you have to take within the confines of conference play.
I lied because I do want to get one more in with you.
Okay.
Have we seen? I hate the end. Is the best of Clemson and Dabo Swinney behind us?
It feels like it. I hate to just be too melodramatic after a game that was really fantastic, and it came down to a kick. So Dabo Swinney had his team prepared. They really had what I thought was a really good game.
Give me something.